welcome back. Oh man, we have a show for you. Back a couple years ago, we had an amazing guest who told us that he was about to do a trilogy of novels. He had just finished the first one. Well, guess what? All three are done now. My name is Vin Dacquino. Our guest is David Carraturo.
How are you, Vin?
Hey, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
Amazing. Got it all done. The trilogy is out. Your story has been told. Break it down for us. What do we have?
Okay. The Columbus Avenue Boys trilogy. Three very distinct works that I'm finally happy to have completed. Camera Nation was completed in 2011. I consider that my political book, my conservative manifesto, which has played out very well. Billionaire businessman who becomes president of the United States and rocks the establishment. I finished Columbus Avenue Boys in 2012 based off of the characters, some of the back characters I had in Camera Nation. And I liked the characters so much, I continued to write about them. So it tells the early years, so where Camera Nation is current time. Columbus Avenue Boys took place in the 1990s, and the family saga with flashbacks goes back to the turn of the century. Very proud of that work. From that work, I didn't have an idea for a third book until a few years ago. Began writing, took me a couple of years to finish.
Yep.
In December of last year, I completed Cameron's Quest, which tells the early years of the Columbus Avenue Boys. So it's all the same characters, the same settings, the same tone of the three families, three blood brothers, but again, three very distinct stories that I'm very proud of.
So now the saga's done.
Yes.
There's no fourth book in this.
Not yet.
Not yet.
There could be, but right now there's not.
I see it. I see it. Okay, so we have three distinct books, but they can stand alone?
Yes.
Sounds good. Tell me, how did you get into this writing at all? When did you say, I'm a writer?
Well, I never said I was a writer growing up. I always loved, looking back, I always did love to write. I would write short stories, I would write in a journal. I always had ideas about some type of fictitious event going on based off of a factual event. So I like to write historical fiction. I always have a very strong passion for history, economics, facts. I love my town I grew up in. I'm a passionate poker player. Really anything that I love to, in my private life as my hobby, I become very passionate about, and it ends up being a part of my stories. So 2010, I was very disenchanted with the political world, and I decided to write a book. And when I'm writing a book,
I imagine being disenchanted with the political world.
So I started writing, and I didn't stop in 2010. By chance, the publisher I had said, well, we have a 2-for-1 special on an independent publishing package. I said, well, I'm not going to write 2 books. But by the end of my book, I knew I was going to write that second book. And I continued straight after the first one to write the second one because I just loved the characters I had created so much.
So there's a lot of David in these books.
There's a lot of David in Chris Cameron. There's a lot of everyone I've ever been in touch with in all the other characters.
Yeah. So you interweave your own life.
Yes.
I probably told you this the last time, and I've said it 100 times on this show. Little boy came to me and said, Mr. Dacquino, how can I write an interesting novel if my life is boring? And I said, listen, don't write about what is, write about what if. Take your life and run with it. Now, did you run with it, or is this pretty accurate to...
No, exactly what you just said is how you write. Because, yes, a standalone life does get a little stale and boring and has its limitations.
Yeah.
But in your mind, there's no limitations.
Sometimes you have to kind of like bend it, twist it a little bit, add a little bit here or there.
Right.
I tell all my writers that there are 5 tools every writer works with. I don't care if you are Hemingway or Carraturo. You have 5 things: plot, character, setting, theme, and tone. You have a plot that runs through actually all three novels. What is that? What is the thing that drives the storyline for your books?
The storyline is the foundation of all three stories is the bond between three best friends, blood brothers.
Excellent.
An Italian-American saga from the 1890s to the 2010 period, where three friends are bonded, galvanized.
From very young.
Well, in Cameron Nation, I had them as friends. And then for Columbus Avenue Boys, I said, you know what, they have to be more than friends. So what I did was I decided to make them distant cousins, but yet they grew up together on the same street.
Yeah.
So they really were more than cousins.
Right.
They were blood brothers, friends. Mm-hmm. And then for Cameron's Quest, I showed how tight they really were. So I wanted, the theme is that all three families are blended. Their parents are interchangeable. You can get a swat in the back of the head from any of them.
And does that put them in a situation where they have to know things that other people don't know, and they have to make decisions about what they can and can't say about each other?
Yeah, well, there's a theme that family bond overrides anything, and these three main characters get themselves into some trouble, but yet they will always work it out together, and it'll always, the underwriting theme will be it's us against them.
So your belief is family is very important.
Family is very important. I have a lot of family meals as the center of it, and even for Cameron's Quest, which was just released, where the message I wanted to get across was things started to go down a bad road for them when they started getting away from being very close to their extended family. The elders moved down to Florida to retire. Their parents were working, and the boys were 18, 19, 20 years old, and they didn't want to have Sunday dinner anymore. And they got away from that life, which led them to make some bad decisions.
Without letting too much out of the bag, by the end of the third novel, are they still alive and well?
Well, what is unique about this trilogy is that it goes backwards. So the third novel is when they're teens, this is in their 30s, and this is when they're in their 50s. And I feel if I write a fourth book, fifth, sixth book, I can go in any different direction. I can go farther back in time to the 1930s, 1920s. I can go to the future. I can go into the latter part of the 90s. I can touch on, I try to touch on historical events in all of my books. So the early part of 2000 with the banking crisis, 9/11, I can touch on those historical events without losing the continuity of my story, because there's a good 10 years, a decade plus of time that I can capture without spilling into the other stories.
Yeah, when I work with writers, I tell them, listen, you're not creating characters. You're creating people. And you need to know how they live, how they breathe, how they think at all times. Is there any question I could possibly ask about any one of your characters that you can't answer?
No, they're my children.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah. I've actually lived with these characters because I pull what people have said to me, and I've found as a huge compliment, was they didn't know if these characters' stories were fiction. They read very believably. And I said, yes, because I've pulled from real life events. No, it's not the exact event, but something did happen and I extrapolated from it. Whether it's someone who's very emotional, I said, well, one of my characters is going to be very emotional. One of them loves cooking, had a passion for cooking, or was great at karaoke. Well, one of the characters is going to be great at karaoke. Chris Cameron's me, so I just extrapolate out from him.
Now here's a tough question for you. Of your three characters, which one shares the Carraturo passion the most?
Actually, it's not even the three Columbus Avenue Boys. It is the grandfather figure in Columbus Avenue Boys, Vincent Scala, who is one of the Columbus Avenue Boys' grandfather and the uncle of the other two. Ironically, I'm getting closer to his age now, and what I'm finding out from that character is that I really was close to my grandfather, and while he's been gone a number of years, living in the same house as him, because we're an Italian family. Of course, we had 3 families living in one house. A lot of his mannerisms and traits and way of life really did touch on me. And from that character, I've put a lot of his humbleness, passion behind that character development. And I'm saying, well, I want to be that character. Columbus Avenue Boys, I've already outgrown them, but I'm now growing into my older character, which I find a lot of closeness to.
It's interesting. When I did Kiss the Candy Days Goodbye, kids would ask me, which character is me? And I say, well, Jimmy, the main character, the coach, the mother, the brother David. It depends. A piece of me is in every one of my characters. And it's just as you say, they're our children. And often what happens is our characters reflect who we are. And some of the answers that they give to each other are our answers, the things we believe in, the things we need to say. Do you sometimes find your characters kind of running away with the story? Where you're writing and the characters are kind of like taking over?
Yeah.
I do too, and sometimes I find myself sitting there and I'm going, whoa, I'm just as amazed. The one thing about being a writer is you're the first one to read it. So do your characters take over for you?
Yeah, and that's why I like to keep, that's why I've had such a passion for writing about these same characters in 3 books. I could have written 3 very distinct stories away from each other, but I wouldn't have the character development of each of them as they have developed throughout all three stories the way they are now. It's each of them have their own uniqueness, and I like writing about every single one of them. And it's very cathartic if something does happen in your life, good or bad. You can then transcend those feelings into a character or characters.
Writing is very therapeutic, isn't it?
Yeah, and that was one of the other sparks when I began to write in 2010. There was, there were some things going on in my life that I needed to, I needed to get away from, and with that, I began to write, and it did put me in another world.
Wow. All right, let's talk about setting. Columbus Avenue. That real place?
Sure. I grew up on Columbus Avenue.
Tell me about Columbus Avenue.
Yeah, and if you look at Columbus Avenue Boys, the cover, I made it very distinct. This is the same exact view. This is the 1940s, and this is present day. So there was an urban renewal project.
Wow.
There was tenements along Columbus Avenue. It looked very like your typical...
So you grew up on Columbus Avenue?
I grew up on Columbus Avenue. My family has been residents of Tuckahoe in Columbus Avenue for over 100 years. So I have a
Columbus
very strong
Avenue
feeling.
is around Tuckahoe, New York?
Tuckahoe, New York.
Which is owned by Eastchester, New Rochelle, that side. It's just north of New York City.
Yes. Yeah, and there's a very rich history there. Tuckahoe was the marble capital of the world.
Really?
The finest marble is in the Washington Monument,
Wow.
Rockefeller Center, the
So it's like
mansion.
a quarry?
It was a marble quarry. It had actually, as I said, it had the finest marble in the world, and it was tapped around the 1900s. It ended. Around that time, more residents came. The train station was developed. In 1899, there was a big field in Tuckahoe, which is now called the Parkway Oval, where they had a bantamweight boxing match.
Now, is Tuckahoe a village of Eastchester?
Yes.
And so it's right there near Eastchester. And so it was not inner city, but kind of city-like?
Not city-like. I would call it blue collar.
Okay.
As blue collar as you're going to get up until it's getting more bougie now. But when I was growing up and the turn of the century,
proximity to the city makes a big difference.
Yeah.
It's the train ride is just a jump, man. You're like less than a half an hour from New York City, right?
yes.
Yeah.
But there's a huge Italian American community. There's a big African American community. It's getting a lot more Irish American. And there was never trouble with the communities. Everyone was blended together. Again, you grew up in areas that, their mother was your mother, your house was their house. You're hungry, you go
was
to
it
someone
New York
else's.
City stickball in the street, or was it parks, or?
Parks, but there was some street activity, but
Yeah.
again, it's not the city, so you can go to a park.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So, at what point in your life did you say, "I've got to write this. I've got to put it in writing"? You were already in your 20s?
I was in my 40s.
In your 40s
Yeah.
when you actually started writing. So what do you do? What does David Carraturo do when he's not writing?
By day, I've been working on in a Wall Street sales capacity
Wow.
since I graduated Iona College in 1986. Took about a 2-week vacation and then started working mid-June of 1986 and really haven't stopped. Taking that train to work every day.
And Iona is a stone's throw from Tuckahoe.
Yeah, I
So
always
you
joke
pretty
that
much
I've
stayed around town.
I joke to people that I've moved 4 times in my life and never out of the 10707 zip code. Can't get out of
Stayed
it.
in your zip code pretty much the whole life.
Yeah.
So it's not surprising that you wanted to capture it.
Yes.
Now, plot, character, setting, theme, and tone. Tone is a very tricky thing for authors. It captures the essence of the aura that you live in. What was the tone there? Was it a homey, comfortable feeling, or were there rocky roads?
Again, I think the theme for a lot of my my writing is, and I use the phrase, life is a roller coaster.
Yeah.
And there's
it
always
sure is.
ups and downs. And there's also a line I use in really early on in Cameron's Quest that I think is sets the tone for that story, which is man plans, God laughs. So you may have the greatest intentions to get up, go to work, and have a normal day, and there's going to be a monkey wrench thrown in.
Yeah,
And I've extrapolated on that on all my stories where they have a plan, but something happens.
Yesterday, I was sitting in bed, watching TV, and tornadoes are hitting all over the United States. In the last couple weeks, it's been pretty rough. And I watch these people standing there, and there's an empty lot where their house was yesterday. And all of a sudden, everything that they have is gone. And all the good intentions in the world, all the dreams, all the hopes can disappear overnight. And somehow we want to capture some of the moments of our lives. And writing a book like this does that. It saves. When I write some of my books, some of the settings that I use, I like to use real settings, and some of the settings are gone. Most of the houses I lived in as a kid, we moved around a lot, are gone. They're empty lots now, upstate, and life just goes on. And we like to leave messages to people, especially to the next generations. What are the key messages that this trilogy delivers?
As I was saying before about the village of Tuckahoe, it is really a part of me. And I would say these 3 books, number 1, are a celebration of Italian American heritage, my small footprint in life in Tuckahoe.
Yeah. Is the Tuckahoe you knew gone?
No, it's still there. There are some.
Nice.
There's some influx of.
There's some major changes.
Newbies. There's some newbies coming in,
Yeah.
but there is still a.
The
if you look
essence
at
is
it,
there.
there is not even a 6 degrees of separation, but there's probably a 3 degree of separation between many families and friends, which I find really nice. Where you may not be related to
it's
them,
sort of
but
like a pocket,
but
isn't
within 2 or 3 iterations, you know them. You've known their families your entire life. And it's still there. There's a lot of people that I went to school with that may not live in Eastchester, but I grew up, I went to Eastchester High School. They may not have stayed in Eastchester, but they're now living in Tuckahoe. So the Eastchester Tuckahoe community is still very, there's still a lot of older families, familiar family names that are still there.
All right, so you work in Wall Street. That's pretty demanding. When and where do you write?
We were talking about the train ride in. There
Okay.
is a half hour to 45 minutes that I have of solitude every morning and night where I either read, think, go over ideas in my head.
Bring your laptop?
No, it's usually in my head, and then at work you have the access to the internet. At home you have access to the internet, and I do a lot of research for my work. And once I have the idea for a storyline or a timeline or a spark, it doesn't take me very long to write, and I'll just spit it out 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 words over 2, 3 day.
So are you a night writer?
Well, to be perfectly honest, when I'm locked into the story, I'm a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week writer.
It just keeps cooking, doesn't it?
I'd be looking at you right now and just thinking of the next storyline, how to fit you into the next
I always say
character.
when I first got married, I used to go on Sundays to my in-laws for dinner with my wife. And, Saturday, I'm writing. 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm writing. And even if I get a few hours sleep, the story keeps cooking, and I realized after going over to my in-laws that at one time my mother-in-law said to me, she looked over and she said, "Stop writing!" And I realized I was, the wheels just keep turning and turning. And the characters, again, they're not characters, they're people. And those people sort of haunt your thoughts.
Yeah.
And ideas keep coming. Talk to me about editing and revising. Are you a big editor reviser?
The stories I write are in very raw form initially. You get, like I said, 3,000, 4,000 words out. Then you have to go and continue to edit. And I'm a stickler for detail, so I try to get the historical aspect or the facts, the weather of the day right. Thank God for the internet. You can go back and
Little
say
details
what
that
happened.
people don't realize.
What happened December 24th, 1965?
Yeah.
Oh, there was a snowstorm. That's an idea for me. Let's factor that into it. And what I do is I'll write the chapter, and even if I'm saying I'm on chapter 8, I'll go back to chapter 1 and read through to chapter 8.
That's exactly what I do.
Finish
Yep.
chapter 9, edit, and
Yep.
revise the 9 chapters. And you keep the idea percolating in your head, and you keep the story going. But I never will start a new chapter unless I've reread the entire book. So in theory, a 35 chapter book, I will probably read 60 or 70 times.
Ray Bradbury, who is a very famous science fiction author, said one time when a kid asked him, kid said, "Mr. Bradbury, how do you know your book is done?" And he said, "Well, when I can read from the first cover to the last without making changes." And I said, "Good luck with that." Every time I read the book, I make little changes as I go through. So I have to read my book like 20 times before I can say it's ready to be published. Yeah. And even then, I get nervous. I very seldom read my books all the way through after they're published. I don't want to know about the things I missed. So writing is an experience. There's a lot of things that you need to learn, and there's a lot of things that you do learn about yourself, about the world, about what you believe. We have about 1 minute left, David. Talk to me. What do we want to say to them in that last minute?
Well, I would say people that knew me growing up probably thought, I didn't even know he can read, let alone write.
Yep.
And my feeling is that everybody has a book in them or a story. They just have to give it a try. No, you do not have to write exactly about your experience, but write your Superman existence. Write about what you want. If someone passes away in your life, make a character about them not passing away and how life could have been with them in your life.
Don't necessarily write about what is. Write about what if.
Have the thread of realism in it. And some people like to write science fiction, romance. I don't write that. I write historical fiction. I like going back and having the historical backdrop. But the point is that everybody has a story. Don't get so ahead of yourself and say, I'm going to write a 500-page book. Just say, I'm going to write a paragraph. I'm going to write a chapter. And from there, the spark will be for the next chapter, or the next 2,000 words, or the next 5,000 words.
Well,
and before you know it,
you heard it here. What he's telling you is, every day of your life is a new page, a new chapter, a new book. Is your life worth writing about? If it was worth living, it's worth writing about. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here. And David,
thank you so much.
Thank you for being here. Always a great guest. Thank you for joining in. Thank you for being part of us today. Remember, one-on-one. Remember, readers are leaders, writers are fighters. Fight for what you believe in.